Okay, great. So, Kiran, I think you had a story I'm going to share
Yeah.
about um, fear and speaking up and when you push through your fear. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think when we were thinking about this topic, it only felt right to, speak about our own vulnerabilities and perhaps where explore, how this has showed up for us. And one of the things that feels very current and live for me right now is how I show up more online, right, in terms of the work that I do and perhaps having more of a voice online. And I've really grappled with what that means for me, what it means for my business, how I try to stay true to myself. But I think it's not so much the content that holds me back, it's the fear of not being liked or the fear of someone not agreeing or finding me too controversial, um, even trolling, right? Because that's the real thing. If you put something online, I think you have to be open to the fact that someone could leave a negative comment and how you might filter some of that out. So it holds me back, and it's something I'm continuously working at. Sometimes I need an accountability partner to do so. So that could just be a word of encouragement from a friend, or actually it's something I take to coaching. But it shows up for me, it shows up in waves, and it's something cyclical that I have to keep on working at to work through that fear, because I know the outcomes could be very positive for me if I was to kind of overcome that fear.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so important. And I think the digital world and social media creates a whole other level of anxiety about
Mm,
making ourselves visible because it's like this sort of we don't know where things are going to come from, and that sort of disembodied sense of we could be attacked by some invisible, faceless force, I think is scary. So
yeah.
and yet we need to find a way to do take steps that feel manageable for us. Yeah. So my example is more analog, and I'm going to take you back to the 1990s when I was in my first job as a lawyer, as a litigation lawyer in the City of London, where my shoulder pads had shoulder pads, and I was working in a team, and I was the most junior person, which is often the way. I was the most junior person in this team and the only woman. My colleague and I had just raided somebody's house looking for evidence. Our client had bought a company, and one of the key employees had moved to a competitor, and our client suspected that they'd taken some vital trade secrets with them. So we had got a court seat in secret. We got a court order which enabled us to turn up on these people's doorstep at 9 a.m. and search their house. So this is pretty heady stuff when you're 3 years qualified. The trouble was we didn't actually find the knockout evidence. So that was a bit of a disappointment. And so we're in the meeting, and it's the first meeting after we've done this raid where the lawyers are all convening. So there's me, my colleague, I'm the junior associate, he's the senior associate, there's the partner, there's the junior barrister, and there's the King's Counsel. And we're all sitting in this meeting, surrounded by piles of paperwork and pleadings and affidavits and witness statements and correspondence. And all of my colleagues are full steam ahead in litigation mode. Right, what are we going to hit them with next? And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, well, this all seems a bit odd because unless we've got the knockout evidence, there really isn't any point in us going ahead with this. And the client's going to be here in half an hour, and maybe we need to have that awkward conversation before the client gets here. And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, well, I must be missing something because all of these people are really experienced and know this stuff much better than me. Why aren't they saying this? And I'm sitting there feeling more and more uncomfortable. And in the end, I thought, I'm just going to have to say something because this is too uncomfortable. So I put my hand up and said, I'm wondering if there's something we need to think about before the client gets here. The client hoped we'd find this decisive evidence and we haven't found it. So, is it in their best interest to keep going with this litigation? We're just at the start now. They could be in for hundreds of thousands of pounds and years of costs. And there's this silence in the room. And I think, uh, should I just go and pack my desk up now? Should I just leave? Have I really said a stupid thing? And I see this look pass between the partner and the King's Counsel. And they go, "Oh, yeah, you might have a point there. Let's think about what we're going to say to the client." And so half an hour later, when the client turns up, the partner's got this commiseratory bottle of wine, which he's offering the client and breaking the news to him that really it's probably not in their best interest to go ahead. And I never forgot that moment because I thought, I could have easily not said anything. And they probably would have got there eventually to the same conclusion. And I could have talked myself out of it, thinking that I had something to offer in that situation. But actually, it was really important to speak up and value the thing that I was seeing that no one else was seeing. And it's something I use a lot when I'm training young professionals in that, don't never discount your own judgment. And there will be things that everyone has their own unique perspective, and there will be things that you will see that other people won't see. And as long as you're willing to perhaps be wrong sometimes, or make a point that doesn't go anywhere, but at least you've made the point. That's really important. So think about those times when you've perhaps spoken up and it was really uncomfortable. So I'm going to hand back to Kiran, who's going to help us with this. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us, Liz. I felt like we were very much there
Right.
with your shoulder pads. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. And it gives
Mm.
us an opportunity as well to really think about how this shows up for each of you, right? And I'd like you to just take the next 5 minutes or so, and if you could grab a pen and paper, or you can type if it helps, or if you just like to sit with your thoughts. But we'd like to offer you 5 minutes to think about, where are you currently playing small to be liked? Where is that showing up for you? And what do you fear about being disliked? What does that mean? How is that translating for you? What do you fear about being disliked? How does it make you feel? And when was a time that you took a risk and spoke up or communicated an unpopular decision?
And so, firstly, I'm going to look at, why do we care so much and why can it feel so scary to speak up and speak out? And then some tools and techniques for managing that so that it doesn't paralyze you. And I think, firstly, understanding that as humans, we are why belonging equals survival. When we were on the savannah, we were very puny and vulnerable on our own. And if we were expelled from the tribe, that meant death. So, at a very deep survival level, we know that speaking up and risking ostracism, even if it's just social ostracism, feels very scary to our nervous systems that are still haven't really caught up from the fact that we're not living on the savannah anymore. So that's number one. And to be more self-compassionate with ourselves because of understanding these more fundamental things about our nervous systems. And secondly, remembering that for millennia, women have been excluded from public life and from exercising formal power. We could only have power really through relationships with men. And, when I was in Egypt on my holiday, I was talking to our guide, a Egyptian woman in her 40s. She said it's only in the last 25 years where Egyptian women have been able to get divorced and keep their rights and their property. And I think, how how recent it is that as women we've been able to have our own power in the world. And so again, we've been inculcated for millennia to keep on the right side of men who had power. And that doesn't go away in a hurry. That's very baked into our DNA. And so since the 60s and 70s, women have participated a lot more in the workplace, and we can have our own mortgages, bank accounts, credit cards, all of those things. And yet, I think is this thing that, to be a successful leader, you have to be competent and you have to be likable. You have to show warmth and competence. But women are judged much more highly on showing warmth and likability than men. I think men will be cut a lot more slack to be tough, hard-nosed, brutal, and people will probably still let them get away with it. Whereas if a woman goes too far down that route of just being competent and tough, but not showing warmth, likability, care, generally she will be, yeah, judged much more harshly and punished. And I think also we've all, as women, been on the receiving end of that woman who appeared not to care. And I always used to find I felt much more betrayed by a woman who behaved ruthlessly and badly than a man. It sort of cut me much deeper. And I think a lot of us think I don't want to be that woman. So maybe I'm going to err on the side of keeping everybody happy rather than speaking up and speaking out. So I think there's a number of reasons why, as humans, we fear, sticking our head above the parapet. And particularly as women, I think there's an extra layer to it. So I think, first of all, understanding that context and being compassionate to ourselves, I think is really key. So knowing all of that, how can we step beyond that? I think first of all is to recognize the discomfort, that moment. And I know often in my body I can feel both a discomfort of I'm scared to speak up, but also I can often feel like a sort of hot uprising in me, particularly in large groups. I notice. I know when I need to speak in a large group because I get this sort of hot energy coming up, and I thought I have to speak, and I've learned to trust that over the years. Um, so I think paying attention to our bodies, the signals that tell us keep quiet, don't draw attention to yourself, but also the signal that actually I've got something to say here that's important. So pay attention to your body and lean into the discomfort. Don't wait until it all feels calm and nice to act, because it never will. There's inherently, it's feeling that sense of risk and being willing to take a step anyway. Secondly, I think knowing your purpose, who and what are you serving in this situation? And we see this a lot, Kiran and I think, with the senior people we coach, that often, maybe there's an unpopular decision they have to make. Their teams aren't going to like it, their colleagues aren't going to like it, their board members aren't going to like it. But actually, you've probably got responsibilities to a wider group of stakeholders. So it's what's for the best interest of the organization as a whole, what's in the best interest of the clients that you serve, what's in the best interest of the community that you're in, what's in the best interest of maybe future generations, the environment. Who are you here for? And connecting with those wider purposes can help to tolerate the temporary discomfort of the disapproval of the people who are perhaps in front of you in that moment when you're communicating something that might be uncomfortable or unpopular or get pushback. So I think having clarity of purpose, and those of you who've worked with us in our programs will know that this is something that we spend a lot of time on, really getting clear about what your purpose is. And then also thinking about what are my resources in this situation. And again, if we're simply invested in, will these people who I'm speaking to now, are they still going to like me at the end of this communication? And so often, and particularly as women, we're very wired and trained in approval and wanting to gain approval. So being willing to unhook from that need for approval and speak from our sense of purpose and values is a quite advanced leadership and life skill, I think, and one yet that is so needed at the moment in the world and so important. So thinking about your resources, so who are the people who inspire you? And what I do is I've got a note on my phone. I've got a page. It's called, you can see there's badass women. So I've got a list of women who inspire me. Oh, I think, and my current one at the moment, I saw this morning that Carol Vorderman, this is quite a UK reference, but she was a TV personality, and she's been very outspoken, and she has said she's going to run as MP in Clacton against Nigel Farage, who is our current far right extremist. Um, Nightmare, and try and see if she can unseat him as MP the next election. And I'm like, go, Carol, if you can do that, I can speak up in that meeting. So think about, have a list, have pictures of people who inspire you, people who you see being brave out there in the world, taking a stand, not just giving in to the status quo and the so think about them, and then literally imagine them, could be imagine them standing behind you, having their hands on your back. So take a moment now, everyone, just think of one person who inspires you. It might be somebody out in the world, it might be someone in your life, it might be an ancestor of yours, but literally just call to mind someone who inspires you, who wasn't afraid to speak up. And imagine them standing behind you with their hands on your back. And notice, even just calling that to mind, you probably notice that your nervous system soothes and settles when you do that, and you feel calmer and braver. And that hand, imagining the hand on your back, and I like to think of like a hand right at the back of my heart, I find really supportive when I'm feeling nervous or anxious. And then imagine speaking and acting from that place. And that's something you can do really quickly in any moment when you need more courage, you need more support. Mm. And then finally, when you are communicating something that's going to be uncomfortable, to remember to signal care as well. So we don't want to swing the other way and become, that sort of hard-nosed person who doesn't care. If you also signal care, give your reasons, maybe acknowledge that this might be uncomfortable, and also it's important remembering to signal care, and also finally that we worry an awful lot about whether what other people think about us, and most of the time they're not thinking about us. They're thinking about their own stuff. So I find that quite helpful as well. There's this thing known as the spotlight effect. We imagine the spotlight's on everyone and everyone's thinking about us, and mostly they're thinking about all of their other stuff. So just dialing down the sense that we are the center of attention, both positive and negative, can be really helpful. So those are some of our thoughts and tips about how to approach this whole question and how to give yourself more courage to speak up at the times when it really matters. Yeah.